today we're going to have a little chat around the Phrygian mode, and I just played a little excerpt from Asturias, and I was just thinking, what are the famous pieces that I know on Spanish guitar, pieces that I know that use Phrygian mode, and that one came to mind. And the famous motive is in E minor, but there are places, especially the middle section, which is a slow movement, where it goes into a B tonality. So we finish the first section, and Albana's kind of finishes it there, and then this call, this falsetto, is in Phrygian mode and has a certain texture and a certain color. So there's one, just to sort of set the mood. The next one I would play a little bit of would be which is from Concerto Aranjuez, the cadenza from the Adagio, the famous which happens to be in B minor. But when you go into the cadenza, it goes into a G sharp Phrygian mode. Very classic, very dark. And the genius of Rodrigo to bring it into that tonality, and then it sort of ends up back in the original. Well, it ends up in, and he weaves a great story around it. So that's the second one, the cadenza. So you already can hear, that's probably one of the best examples of Phrygian mode, because it's so dark and it has that beautiful flamenco sound. And we're talking about a flamenco vocabulary here, because the flamenco language is almost entirely built on Phrygian mode. Not exclusively, but so much of it is. And the canto and the singing in flamenco is very much built on those. So I'm going to play you a couple of more examples. The next one would be the Malagueña. So there you have kind of definitely a grounding in E. You kind of have an A minorness in the middle there. So that's the third example. So I think others will come to mind as I'm talking about it. But so what gives this mode that sound? And I would say it's to do with the intervals. And going back to the first example, which was B. If we're talking about B, or any of the other examples, if we're in G minor, G sharp minor, or in B, or in E. So in all of these instances, we're starting the mode on the sixth string. So playing in E, we'd go E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. And to give it more tension, you can give it the G sharp. And that works very well. So that's one thing you could sort of start to practice, is the Phrygian mode, just white notes, natural notes, underneath an E chord or an E bass. So I actually went up to F, then I went to G, and then I added an E with a flat 9, which is the kind of the Phrygian chord. It's an E, add a flat 9, add an F, and then you get that dark Phrygian sound. Sounds beautiful here as well. Very flamenco. Very flamenco sound. And yeah, I kept going and I was moving around the keyboard, around the fretboard, but just getting back to it, playing an E, it's very easy to slip into other tonalities as well. So if you change the bass, you would then slip into A minor, because the E kind of resolves into A minor. And you could either go back to E, or you could descend to E via G and F. We call that the Andalusian cadence. So this is some ideas. Obviously, you can see different techniques I'm using with thumb, almost going into sort of alza púas, using golpe. These are sort of things that I've sort of developed in my playing, and I wouldn't call them traditional flamenco. They're just flamenco techniques that add to that Phrygian sound and that Phrygian tension, which I love to play with, especially when improvising. So you could literally sit there and work on those simple first position notes, and then and incorporating those chords. Or you could set it up on a loop pedal and just do your A minor, G, F. Whether you want to do it as a rumba or let's just do a slow rumba. So now you'd be thinking A minor to start with, but it's the closer you get to E, the more you can go Phrygian. Let's just try that. So that's just one example, and often when I'm playing with my flamenco guitar friends, including Alejandro and others, that's essentially what ends up happening on stage. And when you hear some of the greats improvising, they often use some of those ideas. That's a very common and easy one. Obviously, you can get much more complex. But for the sake of this video and trying to sort of have a discussion around it, that's the chord progression I would probably go to, even though there are many. You could even just do a 2-5-1 in A minor, and that would work as well. We could try something like. So there's another example of a chord progression you can use. Always, it's kind of it's a minor, dark tonality. So it's not a sort of joyful, Lydian sounding, fun, relaxed, ethereal quality. This one's much more in the darker spectrum. And there's a duende, there's a sadness, there's a crying aspect to it, in a similar way to blues. So we could talk about pentatonic in another video. I'd love to jump into that too, but in a Latin context. But I think it maybe hopefully give you some of you a little bit of a taste for how to sort of launch into kind of flamenco style Phrygian playing and keeping it really simple like that. I hope it's simple enough for you to understand. Let me know what you think of the Phrygian mode, how you use it, and other applications. This is just a couple of ideas that sort of come to mind. And I thought starting with those examples, that one, and definitely go and have a listen to Concerto Aranjuez, and I'll put a link to it in the description. But you can just search for it as well. That will sort of also give you some vocab and some ideas. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you've been enjoying my recent arrangements. The arrangements do take a lot of time, extraordinary amount of work to go into an arrangement, because I write them all out, and sometimes it's just nice to do a video where I'll get to chat and talk and improvise and play. And so I'm trying to balance that up, and should have some sort of chordal type Bossa Nova things coming as well. Thanks for subscribing and sticking around, and I'll see you next video.